So welcome everyone. We are on the 65th session today and almost coming to the end of the first quarter of the year, 2022. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahavidyam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavatam Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajwalito Jnanamayah Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetam Rudaduhe Namaha Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So we are on the chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita. As you can see, it is called as Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga, which means renunciation of action in knowledge. So this is the aspect that we are really studying now. In chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita, we are looking at really what action is from the knowledge standpoint. In chapter 3, we learned a lot about, about karma yoga, but here it is this combination of jnana and karma. That is the aspect here. So how I can really have a grip on action if I have the right knowledge by which I am doing any action. And we talked about last week about how the different kind of karmas that we are involved in, primarily the kartavya karmas, which is our duties, and then the in the kartavya karma class we saw the nitya karma, the naimittika karma, and then also we talked about the actions which we have to avoid. And one may think that I know about actions, but in this chapter we really understand even more deeply about the mechanism of this action and what does that mechanism lead to? What does those actions lead to? Which is, as we know, it leads us into bondage. We are tied down to samsara because of that. So this is what this particular is the main crux of chapter 4 here. Of course, we also saw the aspects of the Guru Shishya Parampara. We saw the aspect of the incarnation of Bhagavan itself. So it is basically an introduction to, who is God, right? So that part of it also we saw. So in reflection time today, I'm going to just briefly touch upon this beautiful answer that Pradeep actually shared. And I thought it would be good for us to also ponder upon it, because it is connected to the last shloka, chapter number 18. So, the question that somebody raised last week was, when we talked about what is action, what is inaction, we talked about, inaction being a karma, which is in an action itself, you're able to see a non-action. What is that and how does it relate to for us with respect to the things that's going on in the world today? So the question that was asked is in reference to the atrocities happening. Why doesn't God do something about it? So Pradeep beautifully put this as, if we do define God as Atma or Brahman, then we know that Atma or Brahman doesn't do anything. The life as we know, it happens in its presence. So he's put beautifully, he says, this life force of God does not do anything. Hence, the very request to this life or for God to do something really doesn't apply in the case of atrocities. I know it seems like a very powerful statement here, but in a sense, what we're trying to show is that Atma or Brahman in the form of Nirguna doesn't do anything. But Atma in the form of the Saguna Brahman, which is nothing but all the sattvic, the pure sattvic guna in us, is actually the karma phala data. So that is the pure sattva in us. So how does God influence something to be done? Is by through the right values, by collectively how if the right values come together, then something can be done. And what are really atrocities? Atrocities is the negative forces, is the tamas that comes in. So that strong tamas, it is being addressed by the pure sattva. So it can be destroyed. The atrocities can be destroyed only when there is a high amount of sattva which can rise in all the people. That is the only way it can be done. It is not that as if God in the form of somebody is just going to drop in from heaven and take care of things. This can happen only where each one of us, by increasing a sattva, by showing love and compassion to everyone, can do something about it. So just thought I'll share that reflection here. Another thing which I wanted to share is just last week, there were two nice news which was introduced in the newspapers here, where Bhagavad Gita is being introduced in schools here. So in Gujarat, the state of Gujarat, they have made this announcement here that will be introduced as part of school syllabus for class 6 to 12, starting very soon in this academic year 22-23. So the statements which I thought, I wanted to put that, which sounds so profound, which is to include Indian culture and knowledge system in the school education and in the academic year. The first values and principles contained will be introduced. And he says Bhagavad Gita should be introduced in the form of story and recitation in class 6 to 8 and then 9 to 12 through form of story, etc. And you can see all these things which I know in the American world wouldn't happen. Recitation of Bhagavad Gita should be included in the prayer program, And immediately Karnataka government actually came out and said that, they want to also introduce Bhagavad Gita in the schools also. And, it says, if not the Bhagavad Gita, what else will give us moral values? In this competitive age, children need the moral education, and if Bhagavad Gita is made in the syllabus, it will help them with intelligence. That's what this minister is saying here. So anyway, I thought I'd just introduce you to the things which is happening here, which is, a lot of good things are happening. Indian knowledge systems, which I'm part of, is really introduced in a big way. Lot of, everywhere you see many of the schools, many of the universities starting off to introduce Indian knowledge systems as a center in many of the universities. So I hope that is interesting. So just to bring about a relevance of Bhagavad Gita, which I think is necessary for us to know. So we finished seeing the shlokas 16, 17, and 18, where clearly this aspect of action and inaction was discussed. And the reason for discussing this again was because Arjuna, through his action, or through his inaction, one should say, because he was trying to run away from the field. So he was not trying to perform his action, right? So he was trying to justify his inaction by saying that that is how one should live a life. So, but Krishna is trying to show him that even in that inaction that he was trying to show, there is a tremendous amount of an action. And that tremendous amount of action is by showing that his ego is in place. He is showing that I am a doer of this action. And so there is a lot of action that was displayed in his inaction. So Krishna wanted to really introduce to him this concept of action and inaction. What is really action and what is inaction? So that is why those 3 shlokas was introduced there. And we discussed this quite a bit. There's just a little bit portion based on some discussion we had last time. I wanted to touch upon that about this inaction aspect. And from there on, we'll move on today to the next section in this, which is starting from the shlokas of 19 to 22. We see Krishna is trying to now explain who is really that person who is practicing inaction in its entirety. So because, for all of us, it is not enough if we discuss a concept. We actually want to know, tell me who is that person? Tell me who really practices this. So this is why this shlokas have come from 19 to 22. So we will chant shlokas 19 to 18 before we get to the next set here. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha Atha Chaturto Dhyayah Janma Karma Cha Me Divyam Evam Yo Veti Tattvataha Tyaktva Deham Punarjanma Naiti Mameti Sorjuna Vitaraga Bhaya Krodhaha Manmaya Mamupashritaha Bahavo Jnana Tapasa Bhuta Madbhavamagataha Ye Yatha Mam Prapadyante Tams Tathaiva Bhajamyaham Mama Vardmanu Vartante Manushyaf Partha Sarvashah Kangshantah Karmanam Siddhim Yajanta Iha Devataha Kshipram Himanushe Loke Siddhir Bhavati Karmaja Chatur Varnyam Maya Srishtham Gunakarma Vibhagashaha Tasya Kartaram Apimam Vidya Kartaram Avyayam Namam Karmani Limpanti Name Karma Phale Spriha Itimam Yo Bhijanati Karma Bhirna Sabadhyate Evam Jnatva Kritam Karma Purvairapi Mumukshubhihi Kuru Karmaiva Tasmatvam Purvaif Purvataram Kritam Kim Karma Kima Karmeti Kavayopyatra Mohitaha Tatte Karma Pravakshyami Yajñatva Moksha Se Shubhat Yajñatva Moksha Se Ashubhat Karmano Hyapi Bodhavyam Bodhavyam Cha Vikarmanaha Akarmanascha Bodhavyam Gahana Karmano Gatihi Karmanya Karmayah Pashyet Akarmani Cha Karmayah Sabuddhiman Manushyeshu Sayuktah Kritsna Karma Kritim. So we did up till here, and right away, what the shloka is trying to show here is, here, he who recognizes inaction in action and who recognizes action in action, in action, such a person is a person who one would call as really a wise person, one who is an intelligent person. So maybe this is the shloka, probably what that chief minister from Karnataka was referring to, how do we gain true intelligence is in every action that we are doing. I mean, today we are a person who are constantly doing something or the other. We rarely stop to think why we are doing things, right? So in and through all those actions, how can I perform them intelligently? So that is what he's trying to show here. So this Ashubhat, the shloka, this Ashubhat, which is referring to this samsar. That is why I put up this beautiful quote, which says it is action with desire that produces samsar. So action where I do things with this I factor. I am the doer of this action. When the minute I think about it, then this Ashubhat, that phrase which was referring in shloka number 16, is what is shown here. So that produces this entire world, samsar, for us. So it is not just the physical action, but it is also my mental action, the thoughts when I have in my mind about, I want to do this, I want to do that, or why did I do this? Why did I do that? All this actually is why you and I are here today in this world. And we need to have a grip on this intelligent action if we have to be completely, rid of any kind of bondage. So that's the aspect here. So this is why this word action is such an important aspect. And today in our regular Western way of thinking, the minute we say action, we only think about it in this smart action. And we call this as an intelligent action. We say this is intelligent action where every reaction leads to a reaction, where every action leads to a goal. Like, for example, if I'm doing something at work in a project, I have to, it leads to the completion of a project, for example. And we discuss how these actions have to be efficient by making it specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-based, so that I gain some goal out of it, right? So that is what we call as action. But Lord Krishna is going much deeper, and he's saying it is not action like we defined, all these kind of actions, like, everything is a movement. Action is nothing but movement. Chalanatmakam karma. That's how we say. Any action that leads to any kind of movement, we call that as an action. So we take action for granted. All these things, whatever we do in our life, we take that for granted. So that is not the aspect that we were talking about. Lord Krishna is reminding us. He's saying what we are talking about is much, much more deeper than that. And it is so deep that even the so-called intelligent people, that's what he's saying, even this very, very intelligent people have been completely confused by it. But he says, I will teach you that, but if you really understand in its depth, then you will be totally liberated. And that is what, we said here, you'll be completely, this whole, I just wanted to show this cage. This cage is something that we have built on our own. We think that, I'm responsible for so many things. I get so attached to the result of the action that I am totally trapped in that particular bondage that I have created here. So that is why I showed this last time, thermometer versus thermostat, where how I can be completely independent of the result of any of these actions. I totally, I do my duty, and I remain like a thermostat where outside temperature can go up and down, but I am completely unmoved by everything that is going on. So that is, we said, and this is why we said a jnani is a person who is like this thermostat, a thermostat who recognizes that, he's a master, he or she is a master of situations, and he or she is not, moved by the situation itself. Such a person is actually totally removed from the tyranny of the surroundings. So it doesn't matter what kind of environment you put this person in, and this person is completely unmoved. I sometimes think about, all our Swamijis, right? They go through so many households, like, for example, when Swami Ramakrishna or anyone who comes to US, they have to go from one state to another. Every week they may be in a different place, but every place they're always so smiling and ready to serve. The external surroundings doesn't matter at all. They might be going from Michigan to Texas. Michigan might be very cold. It doesn't bother them. And when they go to Texas, it's very hot. It doesn't bother them. So the people who are moving towards that kind of scenario, they are such people. So that's what we saw. And then in shloka number 17, we saw about how the actions are of three kinds. They are, activity and inactivity. And then in activity, we saw this karma, which is the kartavya karmas, and nitya karma and naimittika, and there's the other one is a desired action. But action can also be inaction, and it also can be prohibited action. So we saw that. And this was shown in this karmano hi api bodhavyam. One has to know what is karma. One has to know what is prohibited action. Bodhavyam cha vikarmanaha. Then one also has to know what is inaction. Akarmanascha bodhavyam. Gahana karmano gatihi. So that is the subtlety which we have to understand very clearly. So that is shloka 17 we saw, and very clearly. Now, going deeper, what really is this action, we saw in shloka number 18, where in shloka 18, karmanya akarma ya pashet. That person who is able to see karma and akarmani cha karma yaha. So one who is able to see inaction and action, and action in action. So this is akarmani cha karmayaha, inaction in action. Such a person is a wise person. Sayukta kritsna karma krita. Such a person is well accomplished, well integrated. Such a person is totally well integrated in his body and mind. So that is this aspect we saw. So then we saw how do we define really a karmani and an akarmani. Karmani, akarma yapashet. He who recognizes inaction is that it is not really movement, but it is the presence or absence of doership. That is a person who doesn't have any ego at all. Such a person is the person who can, like, even when somebody is doing something, when such a person is doing without any ego, such a person is actually doing a non-action. This is how you try to understand this aspect here. So based on the discussion last time, the part that I wanted to refer today was this thing, where we are doing something and we are seeing something else. So there are 4 ways which you can think about this, And Lord Krishna had used in a very poetic language this karmani, akarmani, and akarmani in karmani. So there are only 4 ways you can think about this. And that is, like, if you're doing an action and you're seeing a non-action, okay? And if you're doing an action and you still see really an action, and you're doing actually a non-action, but you're seeing an action, and you're doing non-action and it is a non-action. So just 4 ways in which you can classify this particular shloka, And again, this is just purely my analysis. It is not given in any of the books or anything or whatever, but I just thought in relation to this shloka, how does it apply to our lives? And let us see through some examples. So that is what I'm trying to show here. And again, when we say action, this action is both at the physical level as well as at the mental level. So even if I'm thinking something, you can classify that as an action or as a non-action. Okay. So let us take the very first example. When I'm doing an action, what I'm really seeing is actually non-action. Can somebody come up with an example for this? Where, I'm saying action is something, a classification. This is here, we are looking at the deeper meaning. Okay.
For example,
what is that? Go ahead, Amran.
Yeah, the number one, I would think of example like, for example, you are teaching Bhagavad Gita to us for our benefit. You are doing an action, but as you do not have any desire, as you have nothing to get any benefit out of this, it is going to be inaction.
Very good.
It comes under the category of inaction. So physically, you are teaching us is action,
right?
But you're not getting any benefit, or you don't have any desire out of it. So it is inaction.
Right. So long as I look at myself as just an instrument, as an instrument, as we would say as a flute, right? A flute is used only to play the music. The flute, I'm using the instrument. So long as we look at ourselves only as an instrument in doing something, then it is a non-action. Very, very good example. What about an action and an action?
Similarly, you are teaching Bhagavad Gita to us, and in the end of the class, you are charging $1,000.
That's very good. Very good. Very good example. Or suppose this example that I came across. If someone really needs, say, help in teaching the Bhagavad Gita shloka, okay. And then I say that, what, I won't help him or her because the person is not giving me $1,000. Same thing, it's similar kind of a thing. So there is an ego associated with that. You're right. What about the third example, which is non-action, but yet you see action?
For example, you are sitting in one place and you are thinking about, you're sitting in one place, but you're not moving, but you are thinking about some activity.
What about a poet?
You are working in a lab. You're doing some technical company. Suppose you are working in a lab, and you are working in a lab to produce something. In return, you're going to get some money out of it. So for that, you are sitting and thinking. At that moment, it is inaction, but action in your mind, you're thinking about the lab process and all. Because after that process, you're going to get money out of it or some benefit out of it. So that is kind of a non-action and action.
Non-action, yes. And Amma just mentioned also about a poet.
Poet that you gave as an example, just seated on the bank and, thinking.
Correct.
While his mind is working.
Correct.
He's thinking, yeah.
Right. Very good. Very good. So that is non-action and action. And the fourth one, non-action, and it is a non-action.
It's like something like a inert object, like a stone or something. So it's not doing any action, and it's not seeing any action as well in return.
Okay. So what you explained just now, Anant, is the complete opposite of really what the shloka is really saying. So it's a total opposite in the sense, one which is totally tamasic, it is not capable of doing any action at all, and therefore it is not acting. So I'm very happy that you brought this example, because I never really thought about it in the context when I was this one, but it is important to bring that context in order to show what the shloka is not. So in that regard, I'm very happy you brought this, But here this is truly a total jnani, who, when the person is sitting for meditation, is at the absolute turiya state. Such a person has reached that state where there is no thoughts, and the person is also actionless, and that person is completely merged into Brahman, is one with Brahman. So that is that state of this non-action and the non-action. Okay. So this is, I just thought in the context. Yeah, go ahead.
So basically, this is the very highest situation. So it's kind of when somebody is kind of samadhi or that state, that time he is in that condition, basically. Right?
Exactly. So the same thing you could, this non-action and action, somebody sitting for meditation, I guess, I don't know, did I skip this? But so somebody who's sitting for meditation, but actually the mind is going all around, all over. In chapter 3, I think shloka number 6, na karmana manarambat naishkarmyam purushoshante. I think that is the shloka where, a person who is sitting for meditation is a mithyachara, is a hypocrite. So this shloka number 3 is an example of a hypocrite, somebody who's sitting for meditation, but or pretending to be meditating. Let me put it that way. There's somebody who is pretending to be meditating, but in reality, there's all kinds of action going on, where the person is scheming, saying that how can he get $1,000 just so that he can pretend to be showing that he's meditating. So anyway, I just thought, in order to bring the shloka more to in perspective, it's good to discuss these 4 different scenarios. Any other questions or thoughts? Does it make sense? Does it?
Yeah, I found that shloka. Karmendriyani shamyamya ye aste manusha smaran.
Correct.
Indriyarthani vimuratma mitthacharasya uchati.
Correct.
That is the third one.
Correct. It is 3rd chapter, 6th shloka or something, or right?
It is the 3rd chapter, shloka 5, I think.
5.
No,
okay.
6. 6.
Okay. Good.
5 is that one. Nahi kaschit sanamapi.
Nahi kaschit.
People cannot stay in one place for a moment.
Correct. Very good, Amran.
Oh, thank you.
So such a person is a buddhiman. So this is, so this shloka puts in perspective really, this aspect of action, inaction, So but we need to look at this from a Jnana Yoga standpoint. Jnana Yoga standpoint is that, so this person recognizes that at the end of the day, all the activities that is being done is actually being done only by the instruments, by the upadis. It's only my body, it's only my eyes. Like, for example, the eyes, the function of the eyes is to see, the function of the mouth is to taste and everything, But when the person says, I am tasting, I am seeing, I am doing, that's when this whole business of attachment and, the whole samsara really starts. So the person who is a true yogi recognizes at the end of the day, it's only the anatma which is interacting with anatma. But I myself am totally a witness to this whole aspect to it. Okay, so that is a person who is totally well integrated in the mind and this one. So that person is called as a yogi. And in 15th chapter, which we chant a lot, right? So in that we will come more examples of this aspect here. But one more thing I thought, because this shloka is so very important, the shloka 18 of chapter 4 is such an important, I thought, I came across this beautiful article, so I thought I'll put this up too, which is, it's something that you can practice. It's really a sadhana, to get to this particular shloka, what the shloka is trying to say. So there is this website, I don't know how many of you know about it's called dailygood.org, So once in a while, I go to this website because it's a website which brings in all positive news every day. It'll give you one positive news from any part of the world. So in that, there was this article was there, which says, do what you please, but I'm watching. And I just read this week, and it ties with the shloka, So I said, okay, we should think about this. So this is such a beautiful sadhana. It says, if you're sitting alone in a quiet place and you're completely relaxed, now what you do is you just close your eyes and you try to see how the images are coming in your mind. So you're just, looking for the images to come into your mind. And you're trying to tell yourself, whatever images let it come, I'm just going to say, mind, you do whatever you want. Okay. I'm just going to watch you. Okay. That's what you're trying to say here. So as long as you're telling this mind, that I'm just going to watch you, you know what? The mind will not do anything. It won't even throw any kind of image at you. This is a very beautiful prelude to meditation. Your mind will be almost like a screen, completely blank of any kind of messages, any kind of images. But then try and see how long you can maintain in that state. The second you just lose that focus, okay, you're losing the focus of that I'm watching, okay, the mind will immediately throw all kinds of images, just like as if it's throwing all these images on a blank screen. So try and see how you can make this, I think, and if you can, I don't remember on which day it came, but you can read that entire article there. I just picked a couple of things which made sense as far as the shloka was concerned. So just practicing this one will allow you to really understand this knowledge behind what the shloka is trying to say about this action aspect. And he calls this as a very liberative method where you're consciously trying to through understanding prevent any kind of messages coming on your mind. Yeah. Any thoughts on this?
Exam which oh,
make sure I'm not losing my time here. So do what you please, but I'm watching.
Priya has to zoom. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mute.
Yeah. Amma has to mute. Yeah.
Okay. This looks like a very nice meditation process. We probably can do meditation with this process, following this process, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It is a meditative process, but also in relation to action. When I said action doesn't necessarily have to be physical, but it can be mental also. So far, we have analyzed all these shlokas through Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, right? Now we really want to, Arjuna must be thinking, so tell me more about this person who is really that Buddhiman. How does it relate to, how does this person really act? So we find that in this 4 shlokas, which is coming up, we find Krishna is actually glorifying this karma yogi. Such a person is a person who has absolutely no kartritva bhava, no doership at all. And because he or she doesn't have this doership, such a person, anything and everything they do, nothing really affects this person. So let us see what are this lens through which, Krishna is really trying to see such a person. So he in this different shlokas, you will see that he's describing this the jnani through the goggle of self-knowledge, and how does this person is detached and everything connected with action. That is where we're going through. And how this person is totally desirelessness, and how this person practices a complete calmness. And finally, he combines all of them. And the final shloka, verse 24, when we come to it, is the most famous shloka of this particular chapter. This chapter has been, so many different shlokas are there, this paritranaya sadhunam, and then yada yada hi dharmasya. But shloka number 24 is Brahmarpanam Brahma Havihi, Brahmagno Brahmanahutam. So that shloka. So you see how beautifully all of them are combined, and finally he will come to this particular shloka. So let us see shloka number 19. Yasya sarve samarambhaha, Yasya sarve samarambhaha, Kama sankalpa varjitaha, Kama sankalpa varjitaha, Jnanagni dagdha karmanam, Jnanagni dagdha karmanam, Tamahu panditam buddhaha, Tamahu panditam buddhaha, Yasya sarve samarambhaha, Kama sankalpa varjitaha, Jnanagni dagdha karmanam, Tamahu panditam buddhaha. So that wise person who is called the Pandita, Tam ahu panditam buddhaha, is such a person whose undertakings, yasya, that person, sarve, all of them, samarambaha, he whose undertakings or initiatives, they are all kama sankalpa varjitaha. Varjitaha, which is completely devoid of kama, of desire, and any kind of sankalpa. Such a person whose actions, jnanagni dagdha karmanam, such a person whose actions are burnt in the fire of knowledge. Such a person, tam ahuhu, such a person is called a pandita. Tam ahuhu was called as a sage by the wise people, buddhaha. Buddhaha, people who are endowed with knowledge. So that is what he's trying to say here. So again, nice thing where you can see the way the word samarambaha, we analyze it a little more, but samarambaha is that, any kind of new projects, which is so very important, I think. Everything starts with how we start a project. So that is why the word are very carefully chosen here, samarambaha and sankalpaha. So again, this shloka, how does it, lie in the context of how we live here? So how do we live today? We live mostly in the past, right? Or in the future. This is how our lives are. So this is why the shloka is very important, again, like I said, I'm putting it in the context of other things. So how do we live in the past? We're constantly worried about, we're constantly dwelling on what happened in the past. This person said that person said this, we are replaying events or conversations, or we are constantly over analyzing everything that has happened in the past. What about the future? Well, in the future, we are constantly worried about what will happen. Like, for example, practical example itself, I can say is the minute, this war between Ukraine and Russia started showing up, immediately people were like, oh my God, just now the COVID thing, we are coming to some idea this, and now the Ukraine and this one, what is going to happen, what is happening in this world, so there's so much amount of fear about what can happen, worrying about what could happen, and then really feeling anxious. And sometimes in this context, we tend to overthink everything that can happen. And we are constantly thinking about worst case scenarios all the time. So this is how we are living. And that is why the shloka is important, where he says, anything and everything, where we start to think about it, samarambaha, meaning the initiatives, undertakings. So this person, anything and everything this person starts, is very clear that this is something which is my nitya karma, or, it of course has to be nitya or naimitika, it cannot be kamya karma. So, the word sum is such an important thing. It basically means that the action itself, sama arambaha, that's how you break this word. Sama arambaha means all the actions are good actions. And those actions are done, they follow the procedures that is already laid out in our Shastras. Again, it's so important now, for us to have a grip on our Shastras, because in our Shastras, the Dharma Shastras, for example, every action is very clearly laid out, how it should be done. But unfortunately, we've come to a stage where we don't really read a lot of the Dharma Shastras. We don't know what exactly and how these actions have to be undertaken. So that's why he says, Sama, the undertakings or the starting itself, people start with a good thing in mind. And sankalpaha. So here's the word sankalpa is referring to the fruit of action. So such a person doesn't have, any anxiety about the fruit of action. So such a person is totally resolved, so has given up the fruit of action. So because he's given up the fruit of action, the action is always very good, So, and such a person is, their actions are burnt by the fire of knowledge. Jnana means knowledge. Agni, which is a fire. So in the fire of knowledge, it is burnt. All the such person's actions are completely burnt because of this knowledge that this person has. So, so this person's actions initiate, when they start the action itself, they recognize that this action is come to me because it's my duty. And this person also has completely given up any anxiety for the fruit of action. So the future thing is also completely wiped out. So this, he says, is burnt. So for this being burnt, Swami Chinmayananda gives this beautiful example of, it's like roasted seeds. So roasted seeds, what is, one would think, why is he giving this example? So typically, seeds are some things which we kind of sprout in the ground and then we water it so that it leads to a tree, right? So the fruit of my action is a tree. But then if you roast it completely, no matter how much of water you add, it is not going to lead to any tree at all. So it is completely burnt. So that burnt aspect is what is shown here with the roasted seeds example. So such a person's, even though they may have some samskaras, some kind of prarabdha karma, purva samskaras, but then by knowledge, one can totally sublimate their vasanas. So in that, the vasanas are completely this, and that is what is called as dagda bija. It leads to completely gets deactivated. So this is again a kind of a reminder for us that in this world, even as we are living here, if we have this knowledge given by Bhagavad Gita and everything, that can completely destroy our samskaras in the presence of this knowledge. So those two qualities can exist only when we have this knowledge. So this is why it ties in with this chapter 4, where you have both when knowledge and this action is combined, then the action, it loses its power to bind the individual. So whatever action we do, it doesn't lead to further bondage. And one is liberated because of this. So that's the idea behind the shloka of here. So shloka number 20 is talking about the detachment aspect. So like I said, the first one was knowledge, now the detachment. Tyaktva karma phala sangam. Tyaktva karma phala sangam. Nityatripto nirashrayah. Nityatripto nirashrayah. Karmanyabhipravrittopi. Karmanyabhipravrittopi. Naiva kinchit karoti saha. Naiva kinchit karoti saha. Tyaktva karma phala sangam. Nityatripto nirashrayah. Karmanyabhipravrittopi. Naiva kinchit karoti saha. So such a person, tyaktva, that is giving up, karma phala asanga. So such a person is completely detached from the result of action and is always content. Nitya triptaha. Nitya means eternally, always triptaha. And nirashrayaha. He's asha means desire, right? So nirashrayaha. So he's dependent on nothing. And when such a person is engaged, so abandoning the attachment to the fruits of action and totally not dependent, when such a person is engaged in action, he does not really do anything. So again, coming back to this inaction, which we talked about, he does not do anything. Such a person is totally actionless. Api, even when such a person is doing, that person is actually not doing. So typically we say the fruits of action is why I'm doing anything, right? So again, somebody may say, then why am I acting? I shouldn't be doing anything, right? So this person is doing things, but it's always done for loka sangraha. Such a person does completely for the sake of the good of the humanity. And such a person is totally a witness to the actions. So the person is a doer, is a non-doer. And such a person is also completely free from the expectation. He's nitya tripta. And such a person is completely, he's not bored at all with doing things. It never feels any strain at all. You can give any amount of work, that person is completely, totally, doing things. So that is the idea behind this shloka. So the shloka is, if you want to look at, I'm here in this ashram here, right? And we have one great Swamiji here, who is Swami Advayananda. I think some people may have heard his name and are familiar with his lectures as also. He says this beautifully, the shloka, he breaks it up so nicely. He says, karma phala sangam. When the fruit of action. So, you start any action with first renouncing the fruit, saying that whatever comes out of it, I will accept it. So karma phala sangam, when that fruit of action is renounced, then one becomes content. Nitya triptaha. One person is completely content. And that contentment itself, nirashrayaha, once you have that kind of a content, then it leads to completely, you're not dependent on any outside factor to give you that happiness. So such a person is truly that anything what they do, na eva kinchit karoti, that person is really not acting in the world. That word action, which we said with a doership. So such a person is not doing anything at all. So karma phala asangam nityatruptaha nirashayaha na eva kinchit karoti. That leads to doership, non-doership. Okay. So with that, we will finish, and then we can discuss. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kasyat dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om purnamadav purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate. Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Thank you so much. Very nice.